are the 4 people that convinced me to get into Hobb a second time after I'd already given up after reading the first book. And I cannot thank 4 people on the planet enough for sending me down this direction, because I think the books are phenomenal. So first off, thank you all very much.
That's the loveliest way someone's called me a nag ever.
So I would like to go around the horn and introduce everybody. In case you don't know everybody, we will begin with Deri. Now, Deri is the queen of Hobb.
That's right.
Undisputed.
Well, I would argue it, but I kind of can't. I've read it a ridiculous number of times. This is the very first year since 2001 I haven't done an annual reread.
Oh.
And I miss it. I'll be picking it up probably next month. But yeah, so I know them pretty well.
She's the lexicon. She's her own Wikipedia of Hobb. So when we go off path, she'll get us set us straight. Yes. Madison Red Skirts. Which character is that going after? I wonder. Madison is in charge of the aptly named Madison Goodyear YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining, Madison. Scott, the bald booktuber. After a baseball hiatus, he's back.
I'm here. I got to meet Hobb in person back in April. I think it was April. So that was really cool. That was all Madison. I would never have even known she was in Phoenix because I don't pay attention to stuff. So thank you, Mads.
I had to live vicariously through you. I'm so jealous, but also super happy that you got to meet her.
Yeah. She is even more wonderful than you would imagine. So lovely person. So very, very nice.
Yeah. So they say never meet your heroes. This was not that case.
This worked out good. I got to meet her and I got to meet Fonda Lee, and both were lovely.
Awesome.
So really nice people.
Wow. Yeah. That's a good day.
It was a good couple of days. Yeah, they both signed for a couple of days. So
did you show up with like every book that you have and say, here go?
I only in physical copy have 3 of her books. So I have Farseer and the nice editions. So I had her sign those. I have everything else in audio and Kindle versions. I did pick up a copy of Fool's Errand, and I had her sign that. And I told her it's the saddest I've ever been in my life, reading wise. Yeah. And she said, well, that's nice. You just have to keep reading. I said, I've read it all. I know what happens.
Yeah.
And
it's just the one that hurt the most.
She said something about, well, I put Fitz in these positions and he just does dumb things. Like, that's just how she talks about her.
She's like, I'm not responsible for this man.
I love that she talks about him like that, because she's been very open in that she outlines the story and then nothing goes how she thinks it's going to, because Fitz doesn't make smart decisions. Yeah. He makes emotional ones. He makes ones without enough information. And she said, and it's really annoying because it adds hundreds of pages to the book.
Right.
Yeah. She talked a little bit about
her. Him out of the situation he's just gotten himself into.
I listened to one of her panels. Oh, sorry, Andy.
And speaking of men that we don't want to be responsible for, Josh of Red for Your Books.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. If Deri is our PhD of Hobb, I'm kind of a lowly little undergrad because I've read the series just once. But it's no talking about how she talks about Fitz. I remember, I think it's the last book, or it's one of the last books in the entirety of the series she dedicated. And she said to Fitz and the Fool, my best friends for 20 years. And I teared up. Like,
I'm tearing up right now.
You're not even in the text yet, and you're like,
how good of an author she is. Like, she can make me tear up in the acknowledgments page.
Yeah, like, I'm not joking. That actually made me tear up a little bit, just because that's such a powerful book that, like, it made sense to dedicate it to them. And now my eyes are burning because of makeup, so just don't worry about me.
That's okay. You blame the makeup, Mads. It's all good. So that does kind of bring us back to the whole. You're sitting here as a newbie, Andy, and we're all going, oh my God, it's so sad, and it's made me cry. And I mean, I cannot tell you how much it made me happy that you did come back to attempt the series again with a different set of expectations. So, I mean, I know it's daunting because I'm a bit, I'm not backward coming forward with how much I love the show. So The books. It lives in my head. I'm not joking. I try not to frighten people away with that, but sometimes I think I might. So I hope you aren't too daunted. I mean, you've read the Farseer, and we'll talk live ships fairly soon, I'm assuming.
If you guys want to, let's see if this ends in a brawl. We'll find out.
So if sticking just to Farseer, how has it kind of balanced to what we've given you as new expectations? Obviously, all of us adore the series. Is it scary coming to talk to us about it?
No, it is not scary to coming to talk to you, but it's scary. What's scary is walking into the book, knowing how much you love it, because anytime somebody sells something that much, I'm like, I'm screwed, right? Yeah. Whenever you see a book or a movie that you really, really love, I always try to undersell it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's something you should pick up. Oh, yeah, that's something you could read. And I'll knock on your door 3 or 4 times. Oh, yeah, you might want to pick that up. I don't know, right? And you just try to, sneak it in under the wire. When somebody comes in over the top, there's no way that it can live up to expectation, right? And so that's what I was afraid of walking in. And I was coming, oh my gosh, I'm ignoring everybody. We got Jordan, we got Ben, we got Belton.
So good to see everybody.
Crying. We got
awesome.
She was only Evie. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we are only doing lives here tonight. Evie, anytime we mention a book outside of the Farseer trilogy, we have to do a shot.
I have brandy. I deliberately went and got brandy because it's a thing.
Green tea.
Right, green tea. I thought of whatever we happen to be drinking. Never would love a world of Hobb. Maybe we will make another convert tonight.
Fingers crossed.
Awesome.
But yeah, for me walking in, I was like, okay, there's no way I'm going to love this as much as they love this. So if I hate it, I need to at least be polite.
Yeah.
Because I'd already read, here's my experience. I read
good to have a game plan.
Yeah, I read the first book and this is in 2000 maybe. And, I didn't particularly warm to it. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then you guys came back around. I was like, oh, you got it. Okay, I'll give it another shot. And so I was kind of mixed on walking in, and it takes a while. Hobb is the ultimate slow burn, right? It is like,
oh yeah.
You take that first third of Assassin's Apprentice, and there's no indication that you're standing on the doorstep of this epic that's really going to sweep you up in this emotion. Whether it's her building herself as a writer, or does she have everything planned out ahead of time? I doubt it. She's just kind of working her way up. But it becomes this blossoming thing that grows and beyond whatever your expectations were to begin with. And I want to do kind of vice versa. For the 4 of you, how did you walk into this series, right? How did this get introduced to you? Was this like a random pickup in a bookstore? Did somebody shove it in your hands like Deri and go, now? Or, So, Red Skirts, how about you? How'd you run into this book?
So I had heard about it through reputation. It just Realm of the Elderlings, Robin Hobb, these are names that just pop around. But we did a read along in 2021, I believe. And it was just for the Farseer trilogy. And so I was like, I want to see what the big deal is. So I knew that Scot was instrumental in me being interested in it. I'm like, these are some of his favorite books, and I want to see what the big deal is. And it was a scheduled read along. So it was like once a month, we're going to read these books. And I even think we kind of had it scheduled to like the first week of each month. So I'm such a mood reader that the first 2 books, if I'm being honest, I read them because they were on the schedule and because I wanted so bad to like them. But if I'm being honest, it was like, not love. Like I did not dislike it. I wasn't considering not continuing, but I didn't really see what the big deal was about. Okay. And some of that I think is expectations because, we read fantasy and so much of it is, the Sanderlanche and these big epic, I always tell people, if you're used to epic fantasy, this is what I call intimate fantasy.
Oh God.
Andy just says she's the queen of the slow burn. She's the queen of show, don't tell. Like you have to really absorb these books, not just read the words on the page. And I just didn't know that it was what I was in the mood for or what I was expecting. But for some reason, when it came to month 3, I was just in the right mood. And Assassin's Quest is the book that really sold me, which is so funny because for so many people, out of the first three, that's the one that they're like, not so much on that one. It must have just been a mood thing, but everything about it just really clicked for me. And that's the book where I really saw what the big deal was about the relationship between Fitz and the Fool. And that's when Kettricken really came to life for me. And that's when the magic really started to become actually interesting to me. And I don't know, everything about that book worked for me, which again is the opposite of so many people's experience. But yeah, I was just kind of like, but not love. But that's why I tell people just commit. I know this is a huge ask, but commit to the first 6 books. If you don't like it after that, I understand. But even though it's my favorite series, I do understand that it's not for everybody. Like, as much as it like actually hurts my feelings and makes me cry a little bit personally, I try to separate that. You know, it's not about you. Just because they don't like your favorite books doesn't mean they don't like you. But it does hurt my feelings.
You're a
quite a
better
bit.
woman than me.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get better about it because it's
Personally,
not for everyone. It is not plot driven. It is character driven. It is about intimate thoughts. It's about a man looking back on his life and his experiences and his mistakes and his interactions. So it's just not, especially with a title like Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin. Everyone's thinking, okay, we're about to get some daggers and some guys, it's not a stabby book, but it has stabby titles. So I think people sometimes go in with their expectations just a little bit off, and then they're just kind of disappointed when it's this retrospective, very internalized, intimate book. But to me, by the time I kind of like got on board with what this was, what she's going for, it was just everything clicked, and it's my favorite.
Deri, what was your initial experience?
I initially bought the covers that you've got as the background behind us, these beautiful covers by John Howe. And basically those covers sort of flirted at me from a bookshelf in a bookshop and went, hello, I'm beautiful. And I was like, oh, yes, you are beautiful. I don't know what you're about. I don't know anything about you, but this is pretty. I'm going to try it. So I bought Assassin's Apprentice.
So this was literally a puppy in the pet shop that was just, nobody said you need to get this.
I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't in any kind of book club. Nobody I know reads. I've always been a reader in isolation. BookTube is the most amazing thing that's happened to me in my life. And this John Howe cover winked at me and I was like, okay. And I bought it with that week's expendable income and I read it and it kind of snuck up on me. In that I was reading it thinking, oh yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's okay. And all of a sudden I was finished and I needed book 2. Like I needed it. I had to go and get it the very next day. And that was me. I was in. And I don't know when in Assassin's Apprentice it hooked me. All I know is for the first maybe half, I was thinking, okay, it's good. It's nice. It's lovely. And then bang, I had to have book 2. I just had to have it. There was no way I was going to put them down. And it was the year before Fool's Fate came out, which is the 3rd book in Tawny Man. So I got to read the first 9 books all in a row. And every year thereafter, I just reread and added the next book as it was published. But that didn't happen for quite a while. I thought I was reading the last book in that series for the longest time. Wow. But it was these beautiful covers that got me.
Good on you. Scott, how about you?
Yeah, so Realm of the Elderlings is not my favorite series. It's my second favorite series, but it's due to my favorite series that I read it. So Song of Ice and Fire is my all-time favorite series. And if you know anything at all about George Martin, he takes some time to finish stuff. So back in the day, and I'm talking early 2000s, he used to be pretty good about telling us, read this stuff while you're waiting for my new stuff. So I came upon Realm of the Elderlings, First Law, Liza Locke, everything that I love is all due to George. So nobody could ever say a bad word about George to me because not only do I love his series, but he got me reading everything else that I adore. So I read the first 2 series, Farseer and Live Ship, in the early 2000s. and then I revisited them and read the rest of it with Madison and others in 2021 or whatever that was. And then I have since reread the first 3 series again, and at some point we'll do it again. So a bit of a fanatic, yes.
Josh?
Well, for me, I took a huge break from the fantasy genre from about 2001 to about 2018 or 19.
Yeah.
I only read just a couple new series, not that many new series. So when I started watching BookTube, which was pandemic time because I had more time on my hands, I started getting into fantasy because I discovered a lot of fantasy booktubers, and I started reading The Wheel of Time, and that was like the first big series I read like in such a long time. So I'm into fantasy booktube, and I was really paying attention because I missed so much. I had missed so much in all that time, and I was just actively seeking out the voices in those times. And Hobb wasn't on every video, but she was on enough videos, and there was just something about the way that people talked about her. Mm-hmm. I just felt that when a booktuber was talking about Hobb, it almost felt like there was a deeper emotional connection when they were talking about Hobb. And I thought, well, I kind of want some of that, and now I feel it. So many of the videos as I read Realm of the Elderlings, and I would get to my book of the month, and of course it would be a Hobb book, and I'd go to talk about it, and I would get tongue-tied, like I'm a schoolboy, and like the girl I'm crushing on is walking around the corner because I don't know what to say.
It feels like love.
And that's how I felt with Hobb. And for me, it was I wasn't hooked as quickly as Deri, but it was the second book, Royal Assassin. I was hooked there, and then by the time I got to it was the first book of Tawny Man, not even the whole book, 150 pages in, I just said, this is my favorite fantasy author. And stuck. And when I got to the end of Realm of the Elderlings, for the first time in my life, The Lord of the Rings was no longer my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember your video when you finished Assassin's Fate, and I was almost in tears of joy. I was like, oh, I loved it so much.
Yeah, I never thought it's been my favorite since. Yeah, it's been my favorite since I was like 14, and I never thought anything would ever surpass it. But this Realm of the Elderlings did.
Nice. By the way, Deri, you look great.
That angel.
Assassin's Fate, but this is a great panel, right? This is our convert. Assassins get enough to really hate, but I loved it too. Medic saying hey, Jordan saying hey. I really want to read
all
the
peeps
over the edge. Join the crew, man. Zen is out of power and suffering like Fitz. Daniel Closer, all you have to do is commit to the first 6 books.
Yeah, that's funny.
Don't pop in to say hi during the baseball commercial. And then dethroning Tolkien, dethroning Stormlight, dethroning Dresden. Ben's still debating. So for me, the first book, I'm going through and I'm like, okay, this is what I don't like about it. It's all the standard tropes. The guy the kid, and he's you're secretly the son of the prince. Okay,
not secretly, but
it's not a secret,
right?
But you're right. She does hit all the tropes.
It's all the fantasy. I'm like, okay. Are we gonna get through this? And then we introduce the assassin thing, and I'm like, I'm not really interested in the assassin thing. Okay, great. And but meanwhile, we're introducing some characters, and more importantly, we're introducing dogs. And dogs really got me.
Yeah, they do, and there are definitely people who are like, I've heard there are dogs die. I'm gonna struggle with that, and I'm like, trust me, Robin Hobb loves dogs, and that comes across. Because when we lose them in this series, it's not just horror, this person's evil. It's heartbreak. We just lost a dog, and there's a very different feel to that.
Forgotten.
Yeah.
No, and they do come back round in terms of how it makes people feel, or memories, or whatever it comes, however it comes. But for me, the way she deals with tropes is that she does them beautifully and then doesn't use them for what they're for. Yeah. Because Fitz isn't the hero.
Yeah, I always say that's one of the most unique things about Farseer is it is a book from the perspective of a side character, basically.
Yeah.
Fitz is the changer, he's the catalyst to what's happening around him. And so I've read Farseer twice now. When I finish Assassin's Fate, I went back and immediately started Farseer again. Not because, well, for a lot of reasons, but mostly because I was like, the whole time I was reading it the first time, of course, I'm so focused on Fitz because he's the one telling the story. Yeah. But the second time through, I focused on viewing Fitz through the eyes of those around him. I was focusing on viewing the story and Fitz's behavior and his choices and his actions through the eyes of Burrick and Chade and Molly and Verity and the people that you know, because the side characters are just so incredible, and it really changes a lot. And it's one of those, first of all, it irritates me when someone's reading a big series and people are like, well, just wait till you read it again, or you won't get it until you read it twice. Like, nobody has time for that. So I don't go in with it like that, but it truly is a series that the second time through, or as Deri can account to, you know, the 14th time through or whatever, it's just like reading an entirely different series. And again, not because I didn't understand it the first time
make
through.
it better.
It's not complicated. It's not hard to understand. But when you're not carrying the burden of trying to pay attention so you get it, oh my gosh, the way you just flow through those books going, I didn't see it that way the first time, or that's why she said that. So it is the reread potential of these books is absolutely
so good,
priceless.
Yeah, so
it's incredible.
It really is.
I can't wait to read Assassin's Quest the most.
Oh,
yes, especially after reading Assassin's Fate, because it mirrors that book so much in so many ways, and it's just they complement each other so well that I was like, I have to start over while Assassin's Fate is still fresh in my head. I have to take a shot so I can appreciate Assassin's Quest that much more.
It's so crazy how Assassin's Fate makes every single book better before it.
She's a weaver.
Like, never seen anything like it before.
And it's not because everything before needed that information. Right. They all work fine without it. It's simply a matter of having additional context and additional perspective. But she does it from really early on because, I mean, Andy, you've done Farseer, hooray! And you've moved into live ships. And we will talk about that later. And there is
apparently we're going to talk about it now because I have no idea what you're talking about.
But there isn't a lot of crossover, but it's the only two sets that don't. Everything else bleeds into everything else. Mm-hmm. And every series you read makes all of the other series richer.
Yeah, true.
And it's a bit like pairing wine with a meal. It doesn't make the meal better or the wine better, but having the experience of both is better. And that's kind of how the series works.
Yeah.
So Farseer is awesome and I love it and it's wonderful. It's of all of the sub-series, very nearly the weakest. So when people love it, that makes me really happy because you're in.
It's one of those safe bets where it's like if you loved Farseer, you're really gonna love the rest of it.
Yeah.
Usually true. Definitely true for me.
Now I feel guilty for not having finished all. I feel like I can't talk about Hobb.
No, let's just talk about Farseer.
You're
because
good.
This journey is, you need to go into it having really thought about Farseer, and BookTube has been amazing to watch other readers do that. You know, it's just so fabulous watching people take it in and properly think about, okay, these are the themes and these are the things I'm noticing. You're an author, Andy. I would love to know from your perspective what it is that you see in these books as an author that perhaps is unusual or something that Hobb is doing that is, I don't know, technically different.
So I'll answer that and then I'll throw it to the guys because the guys haven't talked much yet. And I kind of want to get that input. There were two moments that got me. Is number one, the getting to Nosy being taken away, right?
Yeah.
That hit me emotionally and I was not ready for it because I was not invested in the story very much at that point.
Chapter 2.
But that moment hit me emotionally. I was just like, wait, what is happening here? The second is the introduction of the idea of Ketrican, because she was this person who lived as sacrifice and she meant it. right? And that was this higher level idea of everything that had been introduced at that point. It's like, oh, I like that moral code. Okay. So guys, what about you? What was the moment like with the first book? Did you hook in emotionally anywhere?
Hard to remember my first time through. I will say, I can't remember if it happens in Assassin's Apprentice or in Royal Assassin, but when he's with Chade and Chade says, for somebody so smart, you're really not very perceptive. And it was, I'm paraphrasing, but like it should have been obvious to him that this was another bastard child of lineage that was sort of being hidden away and a tool for the king's use, and Fitz didn't see or understand that. So those little moments are what I really relate to when it comes to Farseer.
Yeah, for me, the emotional connection happened in Royal Assassin just because it was such a momentous book. But I connected with the writing in the first book. And the older I get, the more I appreciate the writers like Hobb that just have such a command of the language and can just really immerse you in the world and the characters. And I love the writing in the first book, without a doubt. Emotionally, it was the second book that hooked me because that was actually, I don't know about everybody else, that was my favorite of the trilogy, was the second book.
Yeah, Royal Assassin's my favorite too. Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to divide things up into 3 books over 3 30-minute periods. So I guess it's okay.
You can do that.
Okay, so the number one thing that amazed me about the first book is after hearing everybody talk over and over and over and over and over about Night Eyes, that there's no Night Eyes in the first book.
You don't get them yet. That's right.
It was like, I got Nosy. I love you, Nosy.
We all love Nosy.
And then Nosy got yanked. And the introduction of the wit and the introduction of the skill, I thought those were like, I'm a little fuzzy on magic systems. And when they get too detailed, I kind of push away from them. But both of those seemed introduced in a really organic way that felt really awesome. And Josh, I was totally in your book. When we got to the end, basically my reaction was, okay, Regal is already the biggest jerk in the world, and now he's the biggest, dumbest jerk in the world. He's like, hey, guess what? We're gonna kill you. And it's just like, hey, guess what? There's an assassin. Here you go. And it's just like, what an idiot. Now, oh, I'm gonna drown you in a hot tub. Here you go. It's like the laziest murderer ever. And then we come out of it, and you kind of left at the end of the first book going, wait, what? None of that resolved.
How?
Right, I'm reading a trilogy. And then so you move into the second book, and you get the introduction of Night Eyes. Do you guys just want to talk about Night Eyes and your reaction to him in general? I mean, I know all of us could probably go on for 20 minutes about Night Eyes, but I'm just kind of interested in what was...
I had a proper Hades from Disney's Hercules moment literally last week where my head burst into flames with rage. I was like, no, you cannot tell me there's a better animal companion out. No, I'm not even going to hear it.
Right.
Just like, no, because there isn't. Night Eyes is possibly the best realized animal companion I have ever read. He is an individual character. He's not just an adjunct to Fitz. He has his own thoughts. He has his own sense of humor.
Yes.
He has his own identity. And it's clear that he and Fitz don't agree on everything. They think about things very differently, and they influence each other. And that's not something I see in other fantasy. Night Eyes has this, he's so witty. I love him.
He burns Fitz so good throughout the whole series.
He really does.
Like,
he
burn,
really
dude.
Does. He's like, yeah, whatever. I just adore him, and that we get an arc for Night Eyes in the time that we spend with him in Farseer. I just really appreciated that we got that, because again, usually an animal companion is just an extra bit of character for the main character.
Yeah.
For Night Eyes to be his own character was just wonderful. And anyone who tells me that someone else is better is wrong.
Wolves have no kings.
Madison said earlier something I think relates to Night Eyes as well, about when you were doing your reread, you were looking more at how the other characters perceive Fitz.
Yes.
But with Night Eyes, we see that right away because he pretty much tells him. And we kind of see all the bad parts of Fitz and the ways that he's not approaching things right, because Night Eyes is this wolf that just is very wise and sees all the things that he doesn't understand. With, Fitz is always either looking at the past or looking at the future, and Night Eyes is just enjoying the moments and thinking in the moment. And you see so often that. And I think in addition to Night Eyes, as Deri said, just being an amazing character, I think what he does for Fitz as well is he gives us a little bit more, because Fitz is the narrator, and by any stretch of the imagination, he's not always reliable. But I think Night Eyes can keep him grounded in so many ways just by his inclusion in the story.
Yep.
Anyone else?
I think if Night Eyes was a human character, he would be Red Foreman, just constantly calling Fitz dumbass. Yeah,
I love it.
So good.
I love. Okay, one of my favorite character types that can be in a story is a grizzled old man that's just wise beyond his years, and he loves you, but he's just like, oh, you dumbass. Night Eyes is the wolf version of that character. So he was born middle-aged or something and grouchy, and I love that. Even though we get Night Eyes as a puppy, he quickly grows into just, like Josh said, he can never get over the fact that Fitz is constantly worrying about things he said in the past and things that are going to happen in the future. And he's like, what about right now? We could hunt. Did you ever think about that? I just love how he lives in the moment, and he definitely keeps Fitz. It's so funny, even though he brings out the animal in Fitz, he also reminds Fitz to be human sometimes. I just love that he kind of gets it better than Fitz does. And he also understands that he has sacrificed more than Fitz has in their relationship. Fitz, Night Eyes concedes to living more like a human than Fitz does to living like a wolf. And in a lot of ways, their shared bond is very unequally yoked. But Night Eyes is so willing to do that for Fitz, and it's just. Like Deri said, I agree with her. And if you've read all these books and Night Eyes is not your favorite animal companion, then you were not paying attention, and you need to start over. Yeah. The only character that I could say would rival that for me is Appa, and he's a TV character from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that's a separate category. So I can keep
it's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different thing.
Scott, how about you?
I would say a few moments with Night Eyes from Farseer that really speak to me. When we first meet him in the cage, he's clearly been abused and led a very difficult life. I love that they found each other in that moment. They both needed each other in that moment. So every time I read that, it kills me. I love that. I love Fitz teaching him to hunt for mice for the first time. That is just the joy that Night Eyes has is wonderful. And one of my favorite moments in Assassin's Quest is he's always playing that Stones game, right? So Kettle is always setting him up with stuff, and he can't figure it out. And Night Eyes is like, well, it's just like a hunt. It's just like this, and this, you idiot. And I love that moment too. So any kind of game playing in my fantasy, I love. So yeah, I like that.
I like it because you then see the rest of the people traveling with Fitz recognize Night Eyes as intelligent in that moment, because Kettle very quickly works out that, okay, you didn't figure that out because you aren't thinking the right way.
Yeah.
But the answer came from the wolf that made them reassess how they looked at Night Eyes. And I really loved that for the story.
The bond between Night Eyes and Kettrican is also
awesome,
super special.
Yeah.
Night Eyes has relationships with Karen because
he's part of the pack. The way he sees Burrick as part of the pack. That that identifier to me,
us, but you hear us.
Yeah, it speaks volumes. That is how he identifies Burrick as heart of the pack, and he has a bond of sorts and a relationship with the Fool, but he calls him the scentless one because he knows that he's not human, that he's different.
Yeah, he recognizes.
but he recognizes the bond between Fitz and the Fool. So therefore, we are pack. Even though he's like, I can't smell you, I don't know what you're about. But because my homie is bonded to you, like therefore we are pack.
And again, we see that in the quest where the Fool is going through a moment of change, and Night Eyes lays between him and the edge of the tent, and Fitz gets a bit jealous. He's like, but hang on, he's pack, and I lay by his fire, and he protected us, and I can keep him warm. This is what pack does. And I was like, oh my God, because you just get it. Okay, Night Eyes understands these relationships and the bonds of relationships and the things that you do when you're in these relationships for each other. So, and I love that. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, for me, coming in, like knowing this was going to be a great character, it's one of the few times where it didn't hurt that character by having that expectation going in, because Night Eyes is so bulletproof. It doesn't matter what your expectations are, you're going to be fine. And it's the combination of wisdom plus humor works great. And there's truth and simplicity. And there's a lot of that works really well. And then you come from the Night Eyes character and you introduce the Fool.
My favorite.
And
love the Fool.
The Fool, like, I know that there are books later on that are about the Fool, but like with the Fool's introduction, I'm like, this is a character worth a trilogy? What's happening?
Right. I mean, because in book 1, we actually get very little of the Fool. And I didn't even catch on to that until my second time through. And I realized, sorry, is my audio okay right now?
Yeah, you're echoing. Yeah.
A little echo.
Should I leave and come back?
Maybe.
You can if you want to.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Okay.
But I know the moment that Mads is talking about, and I don't know if you're aware, Andy, but the Fool was created initially. It's not Madison that's echoing; it's somebody else.
Everybody's echoing, I think. I don't know.
You're not.
Okay.
Scot's cool. Am I echoing?
No. Or maybe the echo's gone. Okay, it's gone. Anyway,
weird.
He was only ever intended to be a walk-on character who delivered the prophecy that Fat fixes Fitz, and never to be seen again. And Robin Hobbs talked numerous times that he just wouldn't go away. The Fool was just, he was letting her know, I'm part of this story. And to know that in the years to come, this series is going to become what it became, and for him to become so integral to the story, it's fascinating to me that he was never intended to be part of the story.
I always love when I hear about that. You see that with like television shows as well, where a character will just kind of insert themselves into the story, and we need more of this.
Yeah.
With television though, oftentimes you see it because like a great actor gives a great performance or something. Want to hear it. So I always find it a lot more interesting in literature like this, because I've seen some interviews with her as well, where it was the same thing when she just said he wasn't supposed to be a main character, but he kept showing up, and he kept inserting himself into the story in different points. And I just realized
just be there and go, okay.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Very interesting character.
So, kind of walking in and seeing the Fool and having him be this very minor character in the first book. And then it starts to grow. And to me, the second book is where I'm with you, Josh. I just love book 2 more than both of the other ones put together, because that pressure cooker that goes on inside the castle is so effective for me, where it just, everything keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it keeps feeling tighter and tighter and tighter until it's like something's got to break.
Yeah.
And I got to take a moment to ask a question. Please, somebody tell me that the Red Ship Raiders thing gets resolved at some point.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say, is my audio better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it may be me.
There is I do not remember the chapter number, but the
answers are delivered as the story goes on. And you think it's answered, and then later you get more answers that make the previous answers make more sense. And then you'll get more answers that make those answers make more sense, that make those answers make more sense.
It truly is a series that builds on itself.
It really does.
But there's a chapter in Royal Assassin where they're going, I mean, this is full spoilers, right? For Farseer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But there's a chapter when the men of Buck are going out to kill the Forged ones. The Forged people that are
the Queen's
these are their neighbors, their friends, their family members that have been kidnapped by the Red Ship Raiders and brought back, and they are no longer themselves. They're forged.
Yeah.
And they're treating it like they're going out on a hunting expedition. And Kettricken is appalled. And the speech that Kettricken delivers in Royal Assassin is one of the pinnacle moments of literature, period. Like, that scene, that chapter is impeccable. And the way that she is able to completely refocus their mindset without talking down to them or scolding them necessarily. I mean, they were being scolded, but they didn't leave feeling resentful towards her or angry. They realized the way her attitude of sacrifice, and the way she addresses these men and completely changes the tone of the expedition. That's when the series, in my mind, went from good to great. And
that impact
so
isn't
many
just
times,
for the men in the castle.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You see it in Shades. You see it, and you really see it in Verity. You see the panic in Regal because he's like, oh shit. And that putting herself in that position and standing up for the people of Buck in that moment is really pivotal for so many people in the castle. It's an amazing scene.
It's just where she really goes from being, this foreign, she calls herself Sacrifice. She's, this alliance, and she becomes the queen of Buck in that moment. And it's important because of the cultural difference for her to see herself as Sacrifice, but for her people to see her as a queen. And in that moment, she becomes queen. And Verity, he's just like, boing, boing, boing. Like, he is all in at that point. He is all in at that point. He is so all in. And I mean, because he's put in a strange position too, these alliance marriages. She's a child, basically. And all of a sudden, he's just like, no, she is a woman. And she's mine.
She is.
Verity.
And I can't step in right now because
emoji face.
I don't want to take away this power she's claiming for herself.
It's such a good scene.
It's beautiful. Not least because Regal is like, you have to stop her. She's drawing power to herself. And Verity's like, I'm quite happy with my queen having power, actually. Everybody look away, please. I'm about to belt my brother. And it was so satisfying that you don't even see it. You just get told that everybody heard it.
It's almost as good as Tyrion slapping Joffrey. Like, it's one of those moments.
It is one of those
what
moments.
What a great moment.
Yes.
So satisfying. This bratty kid getting a slap.
Oh, sorry. Game of Thrones spoiler.
I don't know if it's a spoiler.
It's in the first book. It is old. I don't care.
Yeah. And one of the things is I didn't even realize how much I loved her until I think it was like 2/3 of the way through the second book, where she was this kind of foreign element, and I didn't really warm to her, and then that scene kind of got me, and then little by little, I think it was where the greased step, right, where he tried to murder her unborn baby by giving her. I think maybe that peril helped me go over the edge for her. But that realization, again, slow burn, that slow realization of she's the real deal. Yeah. Like she should be in charge of everything.
She earns it.
She really does. And again, you get this temperature of sacrifice, because in that moment she realizes Regal has to go because that will be his sacrifice to his people. He's a risk to them while he lives. So the sacrifice he has to make is to just not be here anymore. because
So cool.
he was prepared to take her out and her unborn child, because until that point she was like, look, it's part of the family, we just have to work with him, we'll find a way. That was the point where she really understood that he is not on our side.
Yeah.
And you see her reach that, and that's where she really starts to play the game.
Yeah.
In the fairest way possible. I love it. I will not lie for this.
Yeah.
You can tell them I fell and I'm hurt. You cannot tell them I've lost my child.
Right.
Yeah.
I will not lie.
The other thing that got me was that what the whole section with King Shrewd should have been was King Theoden from the inside, right? It just should have been this slow decay of the king by plot. And it was better than that. And it was, I think it was better than that because of Verity. Because you had the dutiful son, which I guess is part of the Rohirrim myth as well. But Verity, night after night after night after night, sacrificing himself and spending every bit of energy he's got trying to defend the coastline, while everything behind him is just
turning to shit. Yeah,
is amazing. And I don't know what it was about the scented herbs. Like, oh, I have to take a shot because I'm going to talk about Farseer. When we got to that section in Farseer, I knew I hated the Emperor because those herbs were involved. I was like, screw all that stuff.
In live trap or
Live ship.
state trap?
Live ship. Oh, you just and with
Live
the smoke.
seer.
Yeah.
Live seer.
Live seer. That's the one.
Combine it all together.
But the other thing too was Fitz going, how can we be letting the king be poisoned?
Mm-hmm.
How is this being allowed? We need to kill whoever's responsible. And Shade goes, so you want to kill me?
Right.
And it suddenly tips that reality on its head, because you're like, hang on a minute. Okay, what am I missing? What is Fitz missing? What is the missing step here? And then you get this insight to the pain that the king is in, and Shade trying to sort of help things along. And you start to see that Shrewd is a victim of something. Still haven't got all the elements yet, but you're like, oh, okay, there's something else going on that we don't know everything about. You're like, how many intrigues are happening in this castle right now?
Pressure cooker.
So many. It's so wonderful. I love it so much. All of this time, he's trying to keep Night Eyes a secret. He's trying to keep things going with Molly. He's trying to stay on Burrick's good side. He's and as a teenager, and he's rowing and doing, only teenagers have that much energy.
Right.
Right.
I think
Seriously.
one of those responses.
And they acknowledge it in the book.
Think about how little sleep Fitz gets, and I'm just like, how does he do it? Because he's up at dawn with Burrick, and then gets woken up in the night by Shade, and he's just go, and he's sneaking away to meet up with Molly, sneaking away to meet up with Night Eyes, and I'm just like, I'm so sleepy just thinking about a day in the life of Fitz.
And not spending enough time with
16 years
patience.
old.
He should be spending more time with patience.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
Talk about another incredible female character.
Yeah.
Lady Patience.
I adore Patience.
I'm going to mute. You go.
She's just everything I wish I was. She's quirky.
I had a realization. She's the literary manic pixie dream girl.
Okay.
I don't know what that is, but I'll take it.
She's the quirky girl that comes in and sort of changes everybody's life.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like,
I just love how chaotic she is and how authentic she is, and she knows that she's not the prettiest or the smartest or what, but she's like, but I'm here, and I'm here. And the way she rallies the six duchies in the end and really coordinates things and gets to live the role of a queen's wife, or sorry, of a king's wife. She was meant to be the queen of the six duchies, and to see her have her moment. I mean, I'm kind of jumping forward, but the end of Assassin's Quest, they kind of give a little, this is what's going on, this is who helped, this is who pitched in, and she was so integral to that staying together. And it's like she kind of had her moment to be like, you know what, I am quirky, I am not your typical queen, but look at me, I could have done it. And I love that she gets that moment, because the whole kingdom questioned Chivalry's decision and they doubted her. And the fact that she was unable to produce an heir, and then she ended up just kind of being this quirky old maid widow tucked away in Withywood. I love that she got her moment to be like, no, you know what? I could have done this just fine. Thank you very much. Patience is awesome.
And Lacey's awesome. She happens to be just like the most technically proficient with a
Badass
blade,
maid.
just ready to take people out. I always feel bad for Patience because you could just tell, like, when she meets Fitz, when he's at his meal, like she's just sitting there going, he should have been my kid. Like, this should be my son.
She wanted so badly to claim him. And they were at loggerheads a lot, Patience and Fitz, because Fitz doesn't want to be claimed by this woman. And because they don't quite have the same wavelength, they're sort of pushing against each other, but they actually want the same thing.
Yeah.
So the moments where they do connect really got me. There's a moment he comes back from the mountains. No, he came back from his first assassination. And she was like, how was the trip? And he was like, had some bad food. And she looks at him and she knows he's lying. And she knows that he can't tell her. And he looks at her and he recognizes that she's accepting a lie. And he recognizes she's done this before with my father. And they both have a thing like, oh, I see you. I see you for who you are. I see you for the role that we have to play. And it was just a beautiful moment of connection between the two of them, where they just suddenly were like, oh, okay, we can work with this.
This is how this is going to be. Okay.
We can build this. And I just really loved that. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, so good.
All right. That's Patience. Let's go ahead and drop the Burrich bomb. Does anybody have any feeling?
I want to marry him. That's my feeling about Burrich.
And that's probably like nobody can blame Molly. I mean, who doesn't want to marry Burrich?
I love how early on Fitz like talks about Burrich like he's an old man.
Yeah,
like what really he's like 30 or 35 or something. Yeah. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, he's really not that old.
Because he was younger than Chivalry, so he's not that old. But
he's younger than Chivalry, and
but in his mind,
Chivalry was young when he fathered Fitz.
Yeah, but it's so funny because Fitz is just—it reminds you. It's just so authentic though, because it reminds me of when it's. So I moved back to my hometown recently, and I'm occasionally running into people that, when I was young, they were adults, and I viewed them as so old. And now I'm looking at them, and I'm like, you were my age when I thought you were old. And now I look at you, I'm like, you're not old. So it's so authentic to me that we get to see him from the perspective of 9-year-old Fitz and 15-year-old Fitz. And he's just like, oh, this old man is just, he's just really cramping my groove. And really, he's just really analyzing this from the perspective of Burke is just incredible, because this is a man who did not ask for any of this. No. His best
he literally gets handed a child.
His best friend is dead. His best friend already married his love. And now he's handed his best friend's bastard to raise. And he's like, I don't know anything about kids. I know about horses and dogs.
And when he's been handed him, he's just got an injury. Like, he's literally just received the injury that he's going to leave him limping the rest of his life.
So he's like, so this is the new me.
Horrific injury. And now I've got a kid.
Thanks.
Okay. Life's just grand.
Thanks, best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet we learn so much about Burrich just from that. You learn that he's going to be dogged. He's just going to put his head down and do what needs doing. And that stays true the whole time. We know Burrich is that if there's a job that has to be done, he will do it. Doesn't matter if it's difficult, doesn't matter if it's dirty. If it needs doing, we'll find a way. He has some very hard lines, and you learn some of his history and you learn the reasons for some of his positions. And all of them are solid. Like, you don't necessarily agree with his reasoning, but you understand him. You're like, okay, I can see why you've held a staunch line on this. Don't agree with you, but okay.
But it's so interesting from Fitz's perspective how because he's unreliable narrator, and Burke is acting as a father figure. So the typical teenage rebelling against their parents to assert their own freedom. But especially in terms of the wit.
Yeah.
And you see that, and the way some of those passages are written, you could almost look at it like Burke is a villain, not thinking about not thinking about his motivations and where he's coming from. And when you get the perspective of everything, you realize, he's one of the most selfless people in this entire trilogy. And he's amazing, but at times you don't feel that because you're seeing it through Fitz's lens, and Fitz is only seeing the things he's doing that's affecting, young Fitz. And but it's remarkable when you think about, and I loved how his story ends in Farseer, with him again being selfless because it's his best friend's grandchild now that he's going to end up raising. So he's a remarkable character.
He's a truly good man.
Yeah,
there's a lot of pushback and a lot of controversy over the choice of Burke and Molly. And it's funny because, again, the first time through, I'm reading it from Fitz's perspective. I'm reading it from Fitz's perspective, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how...
I get why it bothers Fitz.
But then I look at it from Burke's perspective, and I said, what else could he have done? Like,
how better way to protect
in the world they lived in, it's not like she could have had any type of life or thrived as being a single mother. And people would have put two and two together as to who her child was. And what else could he have done to protect Fitz? He believes Fitz is dead, but from beyond the grave, he wants to protect his reputation. He's protecting Fitz. He's protecting Molly, Fitz's love. He's protecting Fitz's child. And he's protecting them in the best way he knows how, by giving them a family and a home and a safe story. So it is hard, but...
He's also protecting Chivalry's grandchild. He's also protecting the royal line. He's also protecting the Farseer family. All of these sacrifice protections. Of course, Burke's going to do that. But I do come back to people going, Molly marrying Burke. Ooh. If we look at just really basic, Chivalry was young when he fathered Fitz. I'm thinking probably 17, 18. So Chivalry's younger than... Burke is younger than Shiv, so he's maybe 16, 17. That's only 16 years difference between he and Fitz. And Molly is older than Fitz.
And also back then,
the age gap is not that
big. Those age discrepancies weren't a huge deal. Like, women married as soon as they were of childbearing age. So I don't think it's weird for that reason.
It never bothered me. And
no, it didn't bother me either.
Let's face it, she had daddy issues.
Well, and I think also I think you got to look from Molly's perspective too. I was just on a chat talking about a different book, but kind of similar vein, that in a lot of these fantasy stories, it's kind of medieval type setting. Even though the gender roles in this series are a lot more feminist and a lot more balanced, you still have a lot of female characters who are looking for a protector. And I think for Molly especially, she doesn't really have anybody else that could do this. So this is an opportunity. She sees someone who is a great man, and he's not that much older, who'll be someone who can protect her and be a provider for her. Exactly. And, I think looking from her perspective, it makes a lot of sense as well.
Yeah.
And he's one of the few people. He's one of the
few people who will ever understand
her heartbreak.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like she could just meet somebody and be like, let me tell you all about my baby daddy. Like, he's just as...
I need you to be sad that he's dead.
Yeah. That's something that they had in common, though, was being heartbroken by the death of Fitz.
Yeah.
Like, that's something they had in common that they could always lean on, was they loved him. And they believe he's dead. So, like, what else are they going to do?
And together they protect this baby.
So before we get to that point, since we're at 1 hour in, I want to talk about the end of Royal Assassin really quick. Okay.
Now, I'm guessing you didn't see that coming.
Cut to Fitz suddenly running around the castle and just killing people.
Because, when you're a sneaky assassin that's been taught to do it all secretly, That's totally the thing to do, Fitz.
Right. No.
Dumbass.
We're just going to murder everybody out in the open. Everything becomes like a George R.R. Martin novel all of a sudden.
Yes.
We just got
the red wedding all over again.
Very stabby.
Then,
very stabby.
Then I'm going to just stab him right in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the end. And I'm with him at that point.
So you get it.
These things need to be done, but justifying it. So this is the point where she took me by the throat and said, "You belong to me with them."
I have got you.
Yeah, because I'm with him, and I thought, okay, this will get resolved.
And you're like, oh, somehow we'll find a way out of this.
Yeah,
one of these jukes is going to come, and it'll get sorted out.
Something will happen.
Burrich is going to show up and save me from the hot water tub of death, and we go all the way down.
Yeah,
and
it keeps getting worse.
That moment where, okay, we're gonna close him out, killed me. Right, I died right along with Fitz, and to be in that moment and to suffer that ending of that character exactly where you're not expecting it at all, and to be allowed to feel those emotions, and then, sorry guys, spoiler alerts just in case, but to be given a resurrection where the death still mattered. It was like, you are no longer the same person.
Yeah, you're actually dead. We have to continue as
that,
you are dead.
To me, was like, okay, I will read everything you ever write. Not a problem. I'm coming along with you for the ride.
Yeah. It's so true, because I typically am not a fan of the resurrection trope, because it makes things so cheap and nothing matters. But the fact that, first of all, and again, because Hobb builds as she writes, you get more and more information as the series goes on, the mechanics of this and why it worked and how the wit and the skill together made this possible. Okay, you learn more, but even in that moment, you have enough information to go, this actually makes sense with the information we are given. But the fact that the world has to move on with the consequences of his death makes it to where it wasn't cheap, because he still has to live like he is dead, and everybody around him moves on as if he's gone, because
he has to give it away.
He
with
died.
Mourning. He can't be in touch with
to me,
patients.
It trumped the trope, because that's typically something that I'm just like, oh, we're not going to do resurrection trope. I don't like it. We're not talking about other series, but like there's a big series that I'm not a fan of that. I wish I was, but what killed it for me was just the constant, they're dead. Just kidding. Like this,
which isn't how it is dealt with here at all.
But I love it because it works here. It works here because she established rules, and follows them.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just it's the repercussions for me. That make it so much special, so much more special. But then how he comes back and how he's different, his life has changed. It's just, I mean, mind-blowingly brilliant. But it is the repercussions. It's not just the like the wheel of time, this person, this is dead, and then they're back. Yeah.
It's we thought we'd done the worst thing possible and lost you. And he's like, yeah, you did do the worst thing possible. You brought me back. And that sense of, I didn't actually want you to, comes through, that I would have been perfectly happy to have stayed dead or stayed with Night Eyes.
Because he is but you've made me be a man traumatized again by his torture.
And what I mean, it's not lovely at all, but you understand it, is that Hobb leaves him with that trauma. He carries it. It affects how he behaves. It affects how he interacts with people in future. It affects the way he reacts to situations, which, again, you talk about other fantasy, often is not the case with trauma. They have this big thing that happens to them, and they go back to behaving normally.
They forgot about it somewhere. Yeah.
And it's just not the case.
Yeah. And that experience in Regal's dungeon, it affects every single aspect of his life from here on out. Like, we still have a lot more Fitz books, and it never goes away.
Never goes
because
away.
This man was tortured to death.
Yeah.
By his
It wasn't a beating. It was prolonged torture that killed him.
Yeah, so and that's what I appreciate about it is she doesn't just act like, oh, that was a chapter in a previous book and now he's alive.
And now he's moved on.
He never is able to get past this. And even when he tries to give it to the stone dragon, even when he tries to give it, he tries to give it away, but it cannot, it affects every moment of his life from here on out. I just love that the trauma is not something you can just next chapter
to integrate it. You've got to find a way to deal with it.
Yeah, it's the realism for me that makes it so special. I was thinking about this recently. I've been reading a lot of crime fiction recently, and the best of the crime fiction in like those series are the ones where you see that there is an emotional toll of dealing with situations like this. And I think it might not be as prevalent in fantasy, but it needs to be. It's you think about these characters that go through all these huge things and all these battles, and they kill all these people, and they're somehow just the same person that they've always been, or they go through something like this. And for me, that's again, it's an easier way to connect with characters when you see that not only that they're human, but that their actions and the things that they go through affect them beyond just like the chapter after it happened. And I think we see that a lot of times in this genre where something monumental happens and then like 20 pages later it might have not even happened.
And that's why I think I'm not scared of 15 16 book series is because my first experience with a long series was Wheel of Time, and I appreciated the fact that it took Rand 13 books to accept the fact that this is all on his shoulders. And that's a very reluctant hero. And that's kind of what I was introduced to. And that when I came to this and, it takes that many books sometimes to realistically get the point across that like something happened to you and you're different now. And you have responsibilities, or you have, these choices that you make. Like this series to me is like a butterfly effect story, that he is a catalyst. Fitz is the changer, and every decision he makes and that the people around him make, it affects everything about the future. And that's a lot for him to kind of carry, but also it takes him pretty much the whole series to accept that he is changer. So I like the fact that, whether it's like you said, not being able to just brush off trauma or accept the reality of who he is in the world. It's not something you can just tell somebody and be like, what? I'm the hidden chosen one? Well, let's go on a quest. I mean, if someone came to me and said I'm a chosen one and it's time for me to go on a quest, I'd be like, all right, okay. Bye, Felicia. So that's why I don't mind a big series, because that's a big problem to address, and I love the reluctant hero done well. And that's a great example of a reluctant hero fits chivalry done well, because Verity's the hero of this story.
I was going to say he's not even the hero of the story.
And I know Assassin's Quest gets a lot of
fame at the end of this.
Assassin's Quest, the ending gets a lot of pushback because we didn't get to see the action. Because Fitz's story is not about the action. He is the one that has to sit back and watch the hero ride off as a stone dragon and save the world. And what does he have to do? Find a way home. He's got to figure out his own ride. That's the story that he's left with. The fool gets to ride off as a hero. Verity rides off a hero. Ketrican comes back riding the back of a freaking dragon and saves her new country. Like, everyone else has their hero moment, and Fitz is left finding his own way back home.
Yeah. And he's left in the mountains going, bye.
Did you guys forget me?
Of course you're not going to get the ending you want, because you're being told the story from essentially a side character. And that to me is just so interesting.
Genius.
Sorry, I got to raise my hand here. Scotty, can you weigh in on this this death and resurrection?
I don't know if I'll weigh on the death and resurrection. I will say I read the foreword to this that Robin Hobb wrote, and she talked about one of her favorite authors as a child was Fritz Leiber, who I've never read, but extremely meaningful to her. And she talked about how in one of the books, several books in, one of the characters she loved faced some difficulties. She didn't like that. So she wrote Fitzliber and said, "This is unfair. You're doing horrible things to this guy." And he wrote her back and he said, "You need to challenge your characters. They need to grow. They need to change." And it happens in every book. So whatever lesson
they have
she
to be
learned
challenged
from that,
by something.
She hits her characters harder than anybody I know, and I read a lot of harrowing stuff. So that's what I would say. I know it doesn't directly relate to your question, Andy, but I wanted to put that in there because that's just who she is. She takes her people through the ringer, and we love her for it. And as awful as it is for the characters, it's great for us as readers, I guess. So I don't know what that says about me, but yeah.
But it's real. That sense of struggle that we watch with Fitz. People call the series very depressing. Fitz is depressing. Fitz, how could you read Fitz? He's so depressing. Honey, I live with profound depression. Fitz is the opposite of depressing to read because he is depressed. But he gets up every morning and he keeps going. And I can tell you there is very little more as inspiring as that. Fitz keeps going. The world just keeps shitting on him. And he makes the dumbest decisions, but he keeps going. And I love him for that. And I love Robin Hobb for creating that, this character who just will not give up.
It is rough to see other characters once in a while have to remind him, you're loved, right? Like we all like they have to continually tell him because he's been crapped on so much. He thinks it.
But it's the depression. And I mentioned earlier that I read in isolation for a long time. For the longest time, I didn't know Fitz was depressed because it just read normally to me. Then I encountered BookTube and people going, "Oh, Fitz is obviously depressed. Look at the way he thinks." And I'm like, he thinks like me. I'm depressed.
Well,
and I got to see him by a completely different view, and it made a profound difference to me, I have to say.
Well, and I don't want to get into the dicey realm of comparison, but a lot of times when people talk about addressing mental health issues in fiction, specifically fantasy, there's a lot of praise that goes to Brandon Sanderson because he writes a lot of, like Kaladin, he has all these mental health issues and he's depressed. And I feel like sometimes it's a little too on the nose. It's a little too spelled out for you, a little too heavy-handed. When that's not, if you've ever dealt with your own depression, anxiety, whether it's situational or chronic, I don't know, it doesn't quite feel like that. And to me, when I read the way Robin Hobb writes real human characters, specifically Fitz, because we spend the most time in his head, but it just feels authentic. And there's so many times that Fitz is having an introspective moment and he's talking about how he feels in a situation or how something that happened to him, what it left him with. And I can't tell you how many times I was reading it and going, I've never been able to put that into words, but that's exactly how that feels. And it just feels so authentic and so refreshing because it's like you're not trying to write a depressed character, you're trying to write a human. And it's like, oh my gosh, it just feels like I've never been able to put it in words, but that's how I feel too.
I think the word authentic that you used is perfect. It does feel authentic, it does feel human. And I think that's why, even though he does stupid things and he drives us crazy sometimes, we connect with him because he feels so real. I mean, like we talk about him like he's a real person. Because he is. She makes him so real. He feels like he's.
But how strange would it be if he did make intelligent choices and he did make the right choice every time? That would be a boring as hell story.
Wouldn't make for very good fiction. That's true.
I mean, it would just be boring. People don't work like that.
So that's why a wish fulfillment fantasy is.
It's nice. So the scene where Fitz comes out of the ground, to me, is the best written scene I've ever read in fantasy. Period. Hands down.
Good night eyes arguing over him.
So that got me so hard. Jaws around my throat. I'm going with you. That being said, and we're a little bit late, But can anybody explain to me what happened in the third book?
Read it again, Andy. Then you'll get it.
But it's a very traditional quest. It's very, very old school. It's very, you have to go on the journey, and along the way, you learn the things about yourself that you need to succeed at the final point of the quest. And you see Fitz, he learns what it is to be sacrificed for his people. He meets the people he is sacrificed for. He learns about the wit. He learns more about the skill. He learns about people inside Buck that he's never encountered before. And he suddenly understands what it is to be in charge of, responsible for this disparate group of people who live in such vastly different areas of land with different priorities and perspectives. And then he's tunneled into, okay, now you've got to go and make sure that the right people get back to that castle and defend them. This is what you're defending. And the hardships and the length of the quest, it's very old-fashioned. It's a proper quest. We're going to spend time. We're going to camp. Mm-hmm. We're going to hunt. We're going to go and struggle. And then we're going to get to the end, and it's not going to be this great, shining, glorious moment. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be hard. It's going to be just plodding work. And then the hero is going to go away, and you're just going to be left there. Yeah. And it's not the ending people expect. And a lot of people really struggle with that.
It's interesting. Just thinking about this book, for me, it makes me realize that I really appreciate, and some of my favorite books are like that, where I don't want to bring anything up because then it would spoil. But I mean, there's a lot of books that I love where the authors just kind of subvert your expectations at the end or do things a different way. I won't mention the book, but like my new favorite, like right behind Hobb in the fantasy genres, Guy Gavriel Kay, in one of his books, there's all these big battles at the end of the book, and they kind of happen off page, and they just tell you the repercussions of them, which is like so anti-fantasy. And I just love it because it's just kind of perfect. The story that he was telling there, it didn't need it. And same thing here. I mean, we're telling Fitz's story. He tells us what happens. We don't need to be there to see it because he wasn't there. And this is all about us following Fitz on this journey. So it was interesting because when I found out a lot of people didn't like the third book, I was just like, why? I don't understand. I don't know. Why didn't you like this third book? I thought it was brilliant. So I think if people want the same cookie cutter type of story and for it to end exactly the same, I mean,
there are authors who can give you that.
I mean, go read the disposable stuff, anyway. Off pedestal.
Something that really stuck out to me with Assassin's Quest is this is where Fitz, I guess a theme that really stuck with me with Assassin's Quest is the inevitability of Fitz's responsibility to the Farseer throne. And it's not what he wants. And this is not really a spoiler, but for the rest of the Fitz series, there's a theme of Fitz wanting his own life. Like he wants his own, like he just finally wants to be free. But every time he's free to be his own person, it's not really satisfying. It's not, he's constantly being drawn back. And we see that in the most literal form in Assassin's Quest with Verity constantly calling him, come to me,
come to me,
come to me, come to me. And he's trying so hard to ignore it at first because he's like, I'm not strong enough. I've already given everything. I literally died. Like that was, I promised.
Have I not given enough?
Yeah, I've given enough. Like I've given my life. Like what else? I've given up everything I loved. I'm having to live like an animal on my own. What else do I have to give? And Verity continues to say, come to me. And that's when we really start to understand the inevitability of Fitz and what it means to be changer and catalyst. And he, again, through all the other Fitz books, he just so desperately wants to be his own. He wants freedom, but he just is so drawn back to his obligation and his promise to King Shrewd. And to me, that's what Assassin's Quest is about him being inevitable.
Yeah, the ties that bind him to the Farseers are more. It's more than just blood, and there's a lot that's gone into it. And the quest is a lot of forming those bonds. That incredibly tight bond he forms with Verity and with Ketrican,
and with the Fool. Like that's when him and the Fool really become. I'm sorry, I'll say it. Soulmates. I believe that Fool and Fitz are soulmates in the purest of forms, and that's that book where we go, okay, like they are bonded beyond, because a lot of what their bonding time and getting to know each other happens off page. They grew up together, and even though we only get to see interactions with the Fool about like 6 times, I think, in Assassin's Apprentice, he's a little more prevalent in Assassin's the Royal Assassin. But once we get to Assassin's Quest, we realize that there's all this bond that happened off page too, that they grew up together in a way, and so we really get to see the culmination of that relationship in this book. And those two, they're just, I believe, the literal definition of a soulmate.
Yeah.
And diverting or breaking expectations of how this is supposed to go was great. I'm just telling you flat out, the whole thing with the stone dragons was like, what the hell is going on? And I didn't mind that at all, because it was just like, what have you made here? What have you done? And watching Verity kind of bury himself into that task was awesome and horrifying and strange, and all these things that you kind of are looking for in your fantasy. And meanwhile, the relationship between Fitz and the Fool is just the hook on which the whole thing hangs. Yeah, because it's just like the two of them back and forth, and kind of seeing the Fool come into his own and being his own thing is really amazing. Like, it blew my mind, because as soon as you get over the mountain, I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. And so you feel like you're kind of holding on to the cliff the entire time, because it's like
no clue.
Yeah, I'm beyond expectations here.
On the
tide, from the perspective of someone who's also clueless. Yeah. And one thing that's cool. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the whole Build-A-Dragon thing was confusing for all of us. I think the first time,
and it will continue
which is fine.
Unraveled as the story goes.
I think probably one of my favorite moments is Fitz is hanging out with Verity, and he looks at him. He's like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, there's other stuff to be doing right now."
But you know what's going on back home.
Come on, dude.
Yeah, it's like, what is this that you are doing here? This isn't what we need, but it's exactly what everyone needed. Yeah. And Fitz just didn't understand it at that point. And we don't as readers. And we don't as readers. I will say, as you go along, you will understand it more.
And it will become
right
clearer
now it's perfectly
as Fitz
fine
begins to understand properly.
Yeah.
And one thing for you, Andy, and for anyone else who's only read Farseer, and not to be a total Raffo person, but it's one of those things that the end of Assassin's Quest is somewhat like, what? But you will learn more about the end of Assassin's Quest when you read Tawny Man. You will learn more about the end of Assassin's Quest when you read Rain Wilds. You will learn more about the end of Assassin's Quest when you read Fitz and the Fool Trilogy.
Especially,
because you're constantly being fed more information that you're going, that's why he acted like that, or that's why he didn't care about that, or that's why
you were like, the stone dragons, what is happening with that? You are literally getting answers to that feeling in the very last book of this series.
That's right.
But you've had some answers already, and you're okay. You're like, oh, it makes sense now. And then you get more information. You're like, oh, it makes more sense.
Of course, it reads well as a trilogy, but you will get your questions answered. You just have to be patient.
And some questions you don't even know you have yet.
Right.
First time I read the last book, I was like, I didn't even know I needed to know that. Now I know I needed to know that.
So legit.
I think I'm guilty of kind of expecting things to not work out. Like, I'm always open to the opportunity that, hey, this might go badly. And that usually doesn't happen in stories. But with Verity, I was genuinely convinced he might be crazy. This whole thing.
That's what Fitz thought.
It just seems bananas.
Might be, and the only reason I had any faith was because Kettrican believed the same thing. Mm-hmm. And if she thought it was true, then I was on board.
Maybe there's some
riding with Kettrican is a good way to roll.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You kind of can't go wrong being on Kettrican's side. You really can't. She's amazing.
But like, how often does an author give you the ending that is, one, completely outside of what you expect, and two, put you in a position like, is what we're doing right? is this the right thing for us to be doing? The whole time they're sitting there in the snow, I'm thinking, this is not going to go
no
well.
Waste of time. Yeah, they need to be.
They're like countries away from the problem.
Right.
How
can
this
we're going to wind up with Regal as king.
Yeah. But how did you feel with that when you got the reasons for Regal's manipulation? How did you feel that had been done, Andy?
My problem is that I hated Regal so much that I didn't care.
Yeah, when I saw it the first time,
so many people are like, he's so mustache twirly. I needed a reason. And I'm like, there is a reason.
Well, it wasn't until Deri explained it to me, honestly, because I was the same. I kind of thought I thought Regal was a little generic. I thought he was just bad for the sake of bad. I thought he was kind of mustache twirly. And even though I read the books and I had the information, it wasn't until Deri kind of laid it out to me. She said, now start it over and think about it from Regal's perspective. Think about who raised him. Think about where he came from. Think about the duchy that his mom came from. Think about, and when she really pointed everything out to me, I went, he really kind of thought he was doing what was best. Like, again, he sucks. He sucks.
He's not a nice person.
He's not a nice person. I'm glad he died. I'm glad he died the way he did. But
yay, small ferret.
Yay, small ferret. Second best animal companion.
Yes.
But it doesn't make him look any better, but it makes you go, God, poor guy. Yikes, that was his life.
Well, and what I really loved about it was the fact that in a standard story, we would kill Regal in the end and we'd feel really good about it.
Right.
And I wouldn't have minded if that happened. That would have made me very happy. But she went in a different way and brought him on board, more or less.
Skill bond against his will. That's kind of badass.
He's been doing to everyone else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She does that through 13 more books.
We're going to make you turn it around.
No way.
No, she's like 13 more books. She will just subvert everything that you think.
Oh, I thought you meant like Regal. Like
Regal
came back from the dead and was forced to be a good guy.
No, but she will always.
She
will always subvert that expectation.
One of the lower series. Regal is one of the least hateable villains that you are going to encounter.
Oh yeah,
in this series.
Well, he's read Live Ship already, so he's encountered some.
Yeah,
you found some of the top tier ones for sure.
Yeah. And we can talk about Live Ships next time because it just happens to be exactly 90 minutes.
Yeah, great conversation.
And again, the magnificent conversation, and I owe you all so much. Thank you for this conversation because I've been looking forward to this forever. I can't wait
to do drag it out for a second though.
Please.
How would you pitch Farseer to a new reader?
Here.
Read this and trust me.
I think that Farseer includes a lot of the things. Wow, I'm going to actually compare it to Name of the Wind, and I know different people have different feelings about Name of the Wind, but for me, Name of the Wind started the exact same way. Okay, I've got all these tropes that I'm familiar with. Here's the kid, and his parents are dead, and he's an orphan, and he lives on the streets, and he's going to go to the magic school, and so it is the best example of taking all of the standard tropes and making them sing.
Yeah, gotcha.
That I've run across in fantasy. And the reason the tropes exist is because they work. The difference is how well do they work. And I think Hobb, and it's with the first book, the whole reason it was you guys is the reason that I kept going. But halfway through the first book, it's the way she writes. It's the prose, right? It's the way she drew me in emotionally without me noticing it. And from that point forward, it's like, okay, once I like the way you write, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And I think pitching Farseer is easy because you can just say, if you like fantasy, you're going to like these.
If you like beautiful words, read Robin Hobb.
Yeah.
That's pretty much long and the short of it.
Yeah.
And it depends, because if someone there are people, believe it or not, who really like the delivery.
It's really hard.
Yeah, prose and delivery doesn't mean anything, and they want plot. I'm going to say this probably isn't going to be for you, because there is a plot, but you have to wait for it.
Yeah.
Like
you have to notice it happening behind you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, so if you are character driven and you enjoy gorgeous prose, don't stop. You're going to love it.
Yeah.
And don't listen to these 4 people telling you that it gets better as the 4 books go. No. Farseer is exactly what you need. You don't have to wait for anything. You don't need to read all 13 books. You will love these 3.
Yeah.
Read it all. Read it all no matter what.
So pick them up today. Thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you in a little bit.